For our next flyer, Gale Buck from Raleigh, North Carolina. Gale Buck.
Several years ago, I was at a mall not too far from here, and as I helped a young lad off my lap, I looked over the next young lady in line. It was Cindy. She was being a good big sister and bringing her brother to see Santa. I smiled and waved as she came up and said, "Cindy, you certainly have grown up a lot in this past year." "It's Cynthia, sir." Oh, she had grown up, and she was at that age. "Okay, Miss Cynthia, what can I do for you?" "Just Cynthia, sir. I would like a balloon. Nothing fancy, just a plain red balloon with no stretch marks, and it needs to float and never came down." I assured her that I would do what I could. I almost cried as she walked away. I knew I was about to lose her. As soon as I got home, I went to my head of research and development and asked him about the balloon. Did we have one? That year I left a plain red balloon and a note for Cynthia which read, "Dear Cynthia, all of our balloons have stretch marks, but we're working on it. Santa." I had to have a special red balloon, so I assigned 8 of my top researchers to this project. They worked on it night and night for years. Each year I would leave a note in Cynthia's stocking, telling her about the progress on her balloon and thanking her for her patience. I would never intentionally leave a toy that was not right, for you see, the trademark of an elf-made toy is that it plays with you while you play with it. As one team developed a fabric for the balloon, it held every size and shape that we gave it and never showed a stretch mark. You might call it a space-age polymer, but we call it the balloon stuff. The other team went to work on the helium, trying to refine it and making it more stable and strong, so they would never come down. They mixed it with all sorts of gases and combinations of gases. We had to evacuate the village twice. The first time, well, they nearly blew up the lab, and the second time, it was rather aromatic. Then one day, an elf tripped over a pocket of unusual gas just on the outside of the village. It had all the characteristics of helium, but it was 10 times heavier. We call it heavy helium. When the team started working with it, they did what all young children want to do. What do you do when you get a helium-filled balloon? That's right. But we learned that heavy helium has an interesting side effect. Let me demonstrate it for you. I get that balloon in a minute. The helium senses the sound of your voice. And the helium makes it delayed. You see why helium changes the sound of your voice. Heavy helium makes it delayed. When the team worked with heavy helium, they started laughing. They laughed so hard that they swallowed the gas and filled their bellies with it. We heard the laughter all the way out into the street. Then the laughter changed to cries for help. Several of us rushed into the laboratory, but there was nobody there. The entire team had disappeared. Then I heard a sound over my head, and I shined a light where I heard the noise, and there was nothing there. We flooded the ceiling with light and found the entire team bouncing around in the rafters, being chased by their laughter. As we came to the close of this project, the head of research and development decided to have a balloon decorating contest. Elves can be very creative and artistic, and I'm not sure if my favorite was the one that looked like a Fabergé egg or the one that little Jimmy Shore did. Oh, that young elf can paint. It was the middle of summer when we tied all the balloons along a rail outside the reindeer barn for judging. And as the sun shone down on the balloons, something strange happened. They lifted the rail up out of the ground, pulled it up, poles, dirt, ice, rocks, everything, just lifted it up and started to float away. We had to hitch up the sleigh and go get them before the balloons became a hazard to air traffic. 2 elves went with me, and as they threw blankets over the balloons to capture them, the balloons immediately began to settle back down to the earth. Slipped the poles right back into the holes where they came from. We learned that sunshine makes the heavy helium even more powerful than it already was. We moved all the balloons to the back of the gift barn, where we could watch them for 2 years to make sure they continued to float as Cynthia had requested. Finally satisfied that we had a balloon that was just what Cynthia had requested. It was bright red with no stretch marks, and it floated and never came down. We got it ready to deliver. We put a special hook in the back of the sleigh for the balloon, and then we wrapped the balloon in a special cover. However, on the way to Cynthia's house, the cover came off of the balloon. The full moon bathed the balloon and reflected sunlight, and the sleigh started to fly backwards. The balloon was heading for the moon and taking the sleigh and the reindeer with it. Michael, my assistant, climbed over the gifts to get to the balloon and put the cover back on. Then we had to pick up all the presents that had fallen out. For 18 years, I had left apologies for Cynthia. This year, she was getting her wish. Oh, how I wanted to be there when she found it, but I had other deliveries to make. Curious, I slipped by her house on the way home, and disaster was breaking out. You see, we had penned a note warning her about taking the balloon out into the sunshine and put it on the cover of the balloon. But her 4-year-old son, Jimmy, had pulled the cover off and nobody saw the warning. After breakfast, Jimmy wanted to take the balloon out and show it to his friends. So Cynthia tied the balloon around his wrist and went outside with him. It was a beautiful, sunshiny Christmas morning, and it didn't take but just a few minutes before Jimmy started to float away. Cynthia grabbed at his feet to try to hold him down, but she couldn't get him. Immediately, she called the police on her cellular telephone. Fortunately, a news helicopter arrived as Jimmy was floating over the treetops and the houses, and as they got close, a man reached out with a long pole and pulled the lad into safety. I arrived just as they pulled the balloon in and saw the most terrifying sight. As they pulled the balloon in, it continued to rise and caused the helicopter to roll over on its side. Then it escaped and was hit by the propeller. The balloon and Jimmy were shooting across the sky. I turned the sleigh around and went in chase. As we pulled up close to him, Michael grabbed the young lad, pulled him in, and I put my coat over the balloon to protect it from the sunlight. We landed the sleigh on the front yard of Cynthia's house. Jimmy was laughing and waving at his friends as I carried him inside and took the balloon off of his wrist. I looked down at the young mother, apologized. Cynthia, your request was a little more difficult than I thought it was going to be. I'm sorry it took so long. She gave me a big hug, gave me a kiss on the cheek, and said, "You can call me Cindy."